And I traded it to this guy. It had this T-50, twin Cessna, just like one we had, and gave him a couple $100 difference or something. And it had wood props on it. I don't know if you remember that. And flew it back, old fixed pitch props. And it was a dog with those things on it, but it was been in RCAF in Canada. And we flew it down there and took the props off of the old and put on this one, controllable props, and got them working properly. And then that's what Mr. Jackson used as long as he owned the airplane. And when I went to work for Paris manufacturing, well, I was more or less out of the airport business, and Ralph had already gone back to Union City, and Russell had gone back to Chattanooga, and I was there just on the airport by myself. But I went to work for Walt Rob Lear up there at Paris Manufacturing, and of course I worked 5 days a week, sometimes 6 up there, and I couldn't. And Riddick looked after the airport for the next 2 or 3 years. And then he had to branch out and make some money because the GI Bill was over. It was ka-flunk. And that just took most of our business. And so we started, and Ralph went back to Union City, as I mentioned. And I'm sitting up there with 2 PA-11s, 2 or 3 Cubs, and he took the Ercoupe to Union City with him, sold it to the McAdoo boys, and he sold a Cub to Alfred Allen. And you remember those boys over there had this dirt moving business, Smithson, Al Smithson, and Stubblefield. They were partners over there in that, and so they bought a Cub to use and to spot work from there with their dirt moving business. And that got rid of one of them. And I sold old Blue to somebody. A whirlwind picked it up one day and dropped it bottom side up and jammed the wing. Riddick rebuilt, and it never did. It had cruised at 60 and land at 60 and climb at 60. About all you could get out of it. The wing just wasn't white, crank white. So I sold it to somebody in somewhere for $200 or $300 or $400 or something. But we were selling probably 200. I sold those PA-11s, ones you sold from the front seat. And I sold 2 of them, and Dunn, the concrete block man, who was flying with us, and he flew, got 2 pilots, sold them in Mexico. Had to fly them down to Texas and cross the Rio Grande with them into Mexico and sold them down there. And Dunn went down in the Navion and brought the pilots back. And he was an older man and very, very trustworthy. So I just, let me know which gas you buy and I'll refund you for it. So he did that. We sold 2 down there, and old Chandler King tore up one of our BT-13s, took off on a dry tank. It quit on him on takeoff. And that's the one that we had built into a 4-seater. It was that 35-hour airplane that we bought up there, brand new. And it warped one of the wings when it hit in that cornfield and flipped, went over, head over heels. And it warped the wing. We found that little crease in the wing on the leading edge. And so we just had to scrap it. And it was sitting down there somewhere. We pulled the engine out of it and everything. But we just kind of, the only airplane I kept was the Navion.
You had 2 of those over time, right?
Huh?
You had 2 different Navions over time. You had the silver one,
Yeah.
and the green one.
Well, the silver one was the grid. The green one was the silver one.
Oh.
And we painted it.
Oh, so you only had 1.
Just one.
Oh, okay. I always thought you had
No,
2.
no, we had 2. I bought Mr. Porter's Navion. It was 83K,
83 kilo, right?
and mine was
94
94 Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the one I painted green. Mr. Porter's was red with cream stripes.
Right.
And Riddick had dealt for it from Mr. Porter. And then I bought it from Riddick. And that's what I flew the last 2 or 3 years we were in Paris, I guess. It was a 205 horsepower, and the other one was 185. But it didn't fly. The 205 didn't fly near as good as my 185. That was a sweet flight. I could practically land it with the trim tab. Just keep cranking that nose up. One hand on that and one hand on the throttle. Or just pull the throttle off and put this hand back on there. Keep and let it come on. I could get within 15 feet of the ground with that thing, then I'd take it by the wheel. Well, I tried it now. It worked pretty good, so I didn't ever do it, make a habit of it, but it was a sweet flying airplane. And I don't know, I sold it to Ben Gaines in McKenzie, had the furniture factory.
Mm-hmm.
He tried to hire me to come over there, and I just couldn't see it. And then he sold it, or traded it in on, and got a newer Navion with about a 250 horsepower Lycoming in it, and that was a dog. That Navion just was not a speedster. Too much drag on it, but it was a sweet flying airplane. Couldn't overload it. I loaded that in the mine down. I put throttle bodies in there over in Union City one day. They flew them in over there, and they're that DC-3 that Holly had, and there must have been 700-800 pounds of them. Cast iron throttle bodies. And I went over there and I took the front seat out, right seat out for a left. And I flew over there and I loaded all those things in there, and the front floorboard, stacked another up, come on back to the seat and stacked them up, then in the back seat. Tires about half flat and the struts on the bottom nearly. I thought, now, can I get this thing off of the ground or not? So I loaded them up and cranked up, tacked it out. It responded pretty good. Poured the power to it, and I used a little extra runway, but I didn't get over 500 feet going back to Paris. It just loaded too heavy. And I had to rev it up a little bit to keep it there, RPM. And I never did load it down that heavy anymore, and I wouldn't then if it just hadn't been an emergency, more or less. And I said, now, am I taking what would be a possible emergency and making a definite emergency out of it by loading this airplane like this? But I had never loaded it to where it wouldn't fly before that, and it flew then. I mean, I dropped about 10 degrees of flaps, and as soon as I got the weight off the wheels, I picked the gear up, and I went 10 miles, I guess, before I got 500 feet. Because I didn't rawhide the engine. I just let it chug along. But it was a good airplane. I'd like to have one right now just like it. And I sold it to, when I moved to Memphis, I sold it to, what's his name, Ben Gaines. Gaines Manufacturing Company. And then he traded it for this 280 horsepower one. And hired an old boy that I had trained as his pilot. And he wanted me to come with him. Said, you'll have a private airplane fly. I said, Ben, we went down to Memphis. Kimmons Wilson, who started Holiday in Memphis, owned half interest in that furniture factory. I believe it was half. He and Ben owned it, and Ben operated it. Kimmons never set foot in the place, I don't guess. But we got in the car and drove down there and went to Ben's house, or to Kimmons' house. And we sat in there, and he says, "Now, preacher, you and Ben go on back to McKinsey." And he says, "Ben, you make him a vice president in charge when you're gone. And he put a selling job on me, which he could do. Just didn't ring right to me. In fact, I really didn't trust Ben Gaines all that much. He operated like a Jewish fella, but he wasn't. And had some bad ideas about things. And I said, "Well, how much money did y'all make last year in that furniture plant? You make any money?" "No, we ain't made any money yet. We're going to." It was fairly new. "And how much money are we talking about?" He said, "Well, Ben, you ought to pay preachers such and such. Something like $500 a month." On the way back, I told Ben, I said, "You know, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm tempted, and I would enjoy the challenge, but I don't know anything about making furniture except what I picked up on the farm and blah, blah, blah." And so I turned it down. And that was the end of my dealings with Ben Gaines. Because here's the way he operated. He told me about they sold a bunch of chairs, straight back chairs or rocking chairs or something that they'd built in Arkansas. And he loaded his truck with them and took off to Arkansas, and he had to stop and spend the night somewhere. And he was at a Holiday Inn, and he got there, and the guy wanted his chairs. He sold them to him. He had them contracted over at this place, but he sold them to this guy at the motel. Unloaded them. He came back home, left the guy over there waiting on him for his chairs. That's the way he'd do. He got the quick buck. I said, "I can't do this." He said, "Okay." So we shook hands and I left. That was it. But anyway, at Airport that was some very enjoyable years. It was hard because we worked 7 days a week. I remember we were called out of Sunday school, a church, to come to the airport, and once or twice. Just have to get up and go. And had a guy come out there wanted to go to Memphis and had to go right then. And whoever was, I guess Riddick or somebody was out there, or Charlie McMillan was out there. Ralph and I were in Sunday school. And so I got up and left Sunday school and went to the airport and put this guy, fastest thing we had was a J3 at that time, and flew him to Memphis. 2.5 hours. Lord, I thought I'd die before I got there. He was a big guy and we were heavy, and I came back in about an hour 15 or so, had a little tailwind coming back, my headwind going. But we did things like that and we made it work. Alf Waddell, who was the SO Oil Company aviation representative in Memphis, he flew a Bonanza, the company furnished him, and he came in up there and he visited with us. We got to know Alf pretty well. And he came up and we had a fly-in one Sunday, and Alf came up and he got on the PA system and he said, "I'm going to tell you something about these Graves boys." Says they can make a living on a rock. Says they're hard workers, they're honest, and says they just gonna do fine. And he just built us up like crazy. And he flew his little Beechcraft Bonanza. And then the Gulf man had one of those, what was a Beaver? High wing, 4 or 5 place, radial engine, with the starburst on the wings like Gulf had. And he come in there with that. And we contracted with Ray Pitt and Parrish, and we had sold Gulf products out there. We didn't do business with Alf. And of course, Mr. Porter had an airplane, and Ray was a good friend, and he and Evelyn waltzed. We'd go to a dance. She'd be out there, and Ray and Evelyn would be waltzing, and they were good together. Man, he'd float, and he'd float. You remember him? He's a big guy. Funny. But Ray would go say, Evelyn, they're going to play us a waltz. She said, Ray, we're going to waltz. He said, yeah. I said, go on and waltz. I love to watch him. I wasn't much of a dancer, you know. We danced, she and I, a good bit, but I didn't get in the jitterbug, and she loved the jitterbug. She dearly loved it. And we'd get Ray's mother-in-law, Mary V's mother, to babysit with you when we'd go to these dances when you were a baby. Every half hour we had to call the house, see how you were. Emma said, honey, go call and see if Butch is all right. I'd go call, and y'all be playing, or he'd be asleep, or whatever. And she'd say, oh, we're fine, go on, have fun, don't worry about us. She kept you.
Wasn't there a time, yeah, I know there was, you told me about it, when Jean Jones had polio?
Yeah.
And you flew her out of Paris to Memphis? Was it to Memphis or Nashville? Really, really bad weather, and you flew her in a twin.
That was in Jeannie Q again.
Jeannie Q, yeah. Yeah, right. And you told me the weather was really bad. Don't remember if it was at night or not. The picture I had in my mind seemed to be it was at night. It was raining and soft runway, and you had you and her and maybe Betty. And I don't remember if she had been diagnosed with polio or if she was just having a lot of difficulty because that's what she had and they didn't know it yet.
Yeah.
And you flew them, I think it was might have been out of Humboldt somewhere, but I thought it was out of Paris, and flew her to Memphis to get her in the hospital. And it was one of those emergencies, and she had to get down there right now.
Yeah.
And the fastest way to get her there was to fly her there, in spite of the weather and mist. Now, I remember the picture I had in my mind is you got everybody loaded up and got the gas in it and started down the runway and weren't sure if you could get it off the ground or not in the runway you had because of the weather and the soft runway and all that. And it was the same kind of thing like you were talking about with the Navion that was overloaded. You felt it kind of get light and just pulled the gear out from under it. And it flew. And you got her to Paris.
Did I take her to Paris or Memphis?
I mean to Memphis.
Memphis.
To Memphis.
You know, I'm blank on that. It's vaguely coming back to me, but I don't. I remember when she had polio. Of course, she was in school in Mississippi, woman's college down there at Columbus, Mississippi.
Who was?
Jean. And,
This was when she was little.
oh,
When she's a little girl. I mean, little girl.
it don't come to me. And yet I seem to remember it. Because I know I got the company, I got New York Life to write her some hospitalization. And she didn't have any, and they didn't think she could get any, but I got her some coverage. New York Life.
Well, would that have been after we moved to Memphis that you did that? Because when I was 13, which would have been 1960, is the year we moved to Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you went with New York Life, and that's what took you to Memphis,
Yeah.
right? So she was, what was she, 2-3 years younger than me?
Mm-hmm.
So she was about 10
Yeah.
then. And this was before that, I think.
I'm gonna ask Betty next time I see
She
her.
was a little girl.
I was pretty well stressed out because I don't remember it. I guess
Mm-hmm.
with her condition and everything and situation we were in, but I don't. It just don't come back to me.
Well, the other thing I wanted you to cover is the airplanes you flew in training.
Yeah, we flew the Stearman, in the beginning, and I told you about flight entered the traffic
Right.
pattern going backwards. I mean,
Right.
against the traffic, and he jerked a stick out of my hand to roll it over. Said, "I'll take you back and wash you out." And I said, "Okay, do it." But he relented, and I never had any more trouble. Flew that Stearman, and then we went to BT-13s with a
Fixed gear? Fixed gear?
Yeah,
Yeah. Radial engine?
yeah, 450 Pratt. Went to that, and I we practiced takeoffs and that with a prop in high pitch, and you had to have a long runway because it'd just put. But he demonstrated, my instructor, that, and then I tried it, and then I did it myself. But I got through that. That was at Shaw Field, South Carolina. I went to primary in Bennettsville, South Carolina, and we did our oxygen thing in the oxygen tank at Shaw Field. Going in, you put on a mask and you take it off, and you had a buddy, and you all looked after each other. And then we finished that, and we hitchhiked a lot. We had most weekends off, or one every now and then, but we were there 2 months in each school. And at Bennettsville, we flew the Stearman, as I mentioned. Then we went to the BT-13. Then I left Shaw Field and went to Turner Field at Albany, Georgia, for advanced flying AT-10s, 9s and 10s, and most of the 10s. And that's where they were twin engine, and that's where we got our twin engine training. And I remember I was sitting in the ready room one day, and everybody else was out flying. I hadn't been scheduled. I was just sitting there reading a paper or something. And this captain came up and said, "Greg," and I said, "Yes, sir." I got up. "You want to go flying?" "Yes, sir." So we went out and got in an airplane, and we couldn't use brakes taxing them. We had to maneuver the airplanes with throttles. And you didn't get it rolling very fast because you couldn't put on brakes. You had to learn to do it without brakes. And we took off, and we climbed up, and he had me doing some maneuvers, and he had me make a 45-degree bank, 360-degree turn into the dead engine. So I everything went fine. I just wound that live engine up and pulled it on the rounder, and leveled out and pulled it, fed the other one in, pulled this one back. He said, okay, never lost a foot of altitude. He said, okay, and then he had me do several things, and we went back and landed. I never heard about that ride anymore. I guess he was just check pilot. But whatever it was, he gave me a passing grade and never had any critique much about it. Because like you, I was a pretty good pilot. I could handle the airplane, no problem. And now that AT-9 was a little different. It was, as I remember, I didn't fly it much, but it was a little faster if I remember. And I don't know what the difference in them was. They were both two-place, twin-engine airplanes. Did you ever fly those twins? You never did. But I know they'd pull engines off on takeoff, and see your trainers how to get out of that and all. And I never had any trouble with any of that. Once I got started in primary, no trouble at all. And you didn't have any either, as I remember, about anything. Because I paid attention to what I was told, and I did what I was told. Then when I got up by myself, I checked them out myself. I remember they talked about the BT-13 and the 15. I think it had a Wright engine, and the 13 had a Pratt Whitney. I flew a 15 once from Montgomery to Humboldt with a boy that lived in Trenton, one of the brothers, and he worked in operations at Maxwell. And we were talking one day, and he said, I'll get an airplane if you want to go home some weekend. You'll fly it. I said, okay. So we got us a BT-15, I believe it was. And we flew with the lieutenant there, checked me out in it, and just a little spot check. And we got in that, then went to Humboldt, went up there and stayed a couple of nights and came back. But that was in the 15. But now in that AT-9, as I remember, it was a little bit faster than the 10 and had Lycoming engines in it, where the Continentals were in the other, I think. Mm-hmm. And we flew cross countries, maximum altitude 200 feet. And so we'd take another one of our two students to go. One would fly one time, and then you swap seat and the other one fly. About an hour and a half flight, so you fly up there, be up there 2 or 3 hours. And maximum altitude 200 feet. I flew, was it 200 feet? That don't sound right.
That's pretty low.
I know I flew through some cotton choppers, and I thought they could reach up and get me with their hoe. But they were teaching us to navigate at a low altitude using a map. No radio help at all. He just flew to a point and turned and flew the other leg, a triangle, mm-hmm. and turned, came back. And then we swapped seats and do it again. And we did that, and we didn't, and we flew formation in both basic training and advanced training. We flew a lot of formation. And I learned to socker right in there and stay, at night even. And I've flown a lot of formation in BT-13s and nothing but the wing lights to go by. And that was hairy, because part of the time I could see that airplane, part of the time I couldn't. I just didn't move, just sit there. There he'd be there. And that got a little touchy for me. And but we learned to do it. And in advanced, we flew cross countries in formation. And that was, let's see, down at Turner Field, I didn't have any episodes down there that's worth remembering as I remember. Other than I flew in there one time in Genie Q, and doggone it, we landed and gassed up. Then my battery was dead. I couldn't crank the engines on Genie Q. And Alton Smithson was with me from Union City. We flew down to Palm Beach. Or we went, I don't know what I was doing at stopping at Albany. Maybe it was another flight. And I showed him how to operate the controls, and that was a Air Force field. Turner Field was. I mean, uniforms everywhere. And I really wasn't supposed to be on it. And so they didn't give me a helping hand in any way. I didn't know it. I just went in there and landed, because that's where I'd taken advanced training. And I thought, well, I said, now, Alton, I got to crank this thing by hand. And I showed him how to set the controls and all that, lock the brakes, and I'd pull the engines through, and then I'd go, and he'd turn on the switches. And luckily, the first time I jerked them, both of them, it's like that, they kicked off. And those guys standing around, soldiers, I just kind of strutted back to around the airplane, got in it. See you guys, took off, left. But I was fortunate with that. And we went down, where we were going, I don't remember. But he went with me one time to West Palm Beach when Mr. Jackson went down there to a friend of his in the hotel business, auctioned off his furniture out of the house at West Palm Beach, and we stayed in their guest house. Alton and I did. We were down there about 4 or 5 days, and Mr. Jackson supervised the auctioning off of all that furniture in that house. So we had free time. We just went all over, rented us a car, and just took off. But we were down there, and we came back 4 or 5 days. Dropped Alton off in Union City and went on back to Perry. But I'm racking my brain about this flight with Gene. Maybe it'll come to me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it'll come to me. But there were some tough times when she was sick for so long.
Yeah.
Betty and Ralph were just worried out of their minds, as we all were.
You told me they would put warm cloths on her legs.
Mm-hmm.
And move her legs, exercise her legs.
Mm-hmm.
Just about 24 hours a day.
Yeah. And she was how old about you?
I don't remember. In my mind, I seem to remember that it seems to me that she was really young, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years old or something.
Yeah.
But she recovered. I mean, she made a
excellent recovery, didn't she?
100% recovered, it
Yeah.
seems, till MS grabbed her.
I'll ask Betty about that, because I remember the polio, but I don't remember flying her, and yet it seems like I do. To Memphis. Yeah. But I'll check with Betty. We'll get that straight.
Okay.
She'll remember too.
Yeah.
Just like you have.
Well, we take a break for lunch, we give her a call.
Hmm?
We take a break for lunch, we'll give her a call.
You're
Call
Betty?
Betty, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Call her and ask her. The other things that I remembered you telling me about, to digress back to B-24s,
Mm-hmm.
was how cold it was
Yeah.
at altitude, and how thankful you were when you got your electric suits.
Oh man, that was a trip, a gift from heaven. Those electric suits. All we wore was coveralls. I'd put on my ODs, my flight coveralls, and that electric suit. Maybe I didn't put on coveralls. but I had to have pockets, so I did. I was lightweight and put on that electric suit, put on your gloves and put on your boots, and plugged them all in together and plugged it in the side of the airplane, set the thermostat, just like flying an electric blanket. That was great. Oh, man. But I'll tell you, I have never been so cold in my life as I was out at Clovis. I flew with a bunch one night just as a passenger. Of course, I refused to fly as a co-pilot. I really did when they was going to make me a co-pilot to a B-17 jock. I finally did, and we got to be good friends. And I taught him to fly the B-24. And then Captain Davis moved me out of that, gave me a crew, and then he moved me to flight leader. And I didn't fly but every fourth mission then. Abe would lead one, Davis would lead one, and Bob would cleave one, and I was the fourth man. I'd lead our squadron every fourth mission. So it stretched me out, way out, to getting through. But you had a question, what was it?
About the cold.
And we got in that airplane, and I didn't have anything but it was hot on the ground. I mean, it was hot out in Clovis. I had on just a suit of pinks and a tie and a hat. No gloves, no jacket, no nothing. And we took off and flew it to about 10 o'clock at night. And I sat back there on that flight deck. I guess Abe was punishing me. And finally, one of the guys had left his leather jacket back there. And I asked him if I could wear it. And he said, yeah, go ahead. I put it on, and that helped. But I shivered till midnight, so I got back to the barracks. But oh man, Butch, I was ornery about that. They'd send a Jeep up there to get me to go fly. I wouldn't go. I wouldn't even answer the door. I don't know, but Abe was patient with me, I guess, or George Davis. I didn't know either one of them, but I guess they were. And we were over there at, we were at Savannah, and Abe came to me, and I was flying co-pilot for Hurricane. He says, and he knew I was qualified first pilot. But Herc had 30 days seniority on me. He got out I got out in Class G, and he got out in F a month earlier. So he had 30 days seniority. And so Abe asked me one day, he said, I need to go up to Nashville. Do you want to go? Let's come go with me. I said, okay. So he flew the airplane, I flew co-pilot. We got up there and we were getting ready to come back, and all we did was eat lunch. He didn't have any business up there. He was just taking me for a little ride. He was a squadron commander. And we started to leave, and the crank number 3 and the starter shaft broke. We just felt it. It started to turn in the engine, and pop, broke shaft. We couldn't crank number 3. So we sat there and we got him out there working. I said, Captain, I says, if you'll give me permission, I'll feather that number 3, and I'll take it off on 1, 2, and 4. And as soon as I get airspeed, I'll unfeather that booger and crank it. We'll go home. He said, well, he wouldn't do it. We better not do that. I said, but I can do it. It was light, you know. It was one of those old no turrets, as I remember. And it was light. I could have flown it out on 3. At Nashville had pretty long runways. And he wouldn't agree to it, so we had to stay overnight while they changed the starter. I didn't have a thing with me but my coveralls and hat and gloves, and jacket, leather jacket. So we went to the barracks, went there, and they gave us a bunk. and we ate in the mess hall. Came back the next day. And I never knew the reason for the flight unless he was seeing who I was. And he saw that I would do things. Of course, I could fly that airplane on 3 engines. I knew I could. I thought I could. And, of course, you could pull it off at 80 miles an hour if you just did it. I know I used to do short field takeoffs at Smyrna, up there. And I'd tell the student, I said, we're going to do a short field takeoff and landing. And I'd tell the tower, I said, we're going to make a short field takeoff and landing. We're going to fly the pattern and come back. Roger. And here's what I did with him. I says, now, you're going to lock your brakes. You're going to hold it back till you get full power on all engines. And when you get full power, you let off and we go. When the airspeed reaches 80, you bring that wheel back in your gut, and I'm going to put on 20 degrees of flaps, and we're going to fly. We get to just tearing down that runway. When it hit 80, I hit the flap handle, and he pulled the wheel back in his gut. It'd just shoot up to about 200 feet. I said, when you get up to about, I said, level off and leave the power on till we get some speed, and I'm going to milk the flaps up. I got the gear coming up. And I get the gear up, as soon as I left the ground, I'd hit the gear handle, and they'd come up. And then the flaps would be on the way down, and we'd break ground. And we'd shoot up to about 200 feet and then get the nose down, get some airspeed, and then we'd go on. He says, I said, you didn't think this old jug would do it, did you? He said, no, I didn't. Scared the hell out of me. So we went around. I said, now here's what we're going to do on the landing. We're going to slow it down to about 80, 85. I'm going to put on a little flap. We're going to drop the gear and just keep pulling off on the power. And get your nose up. We're going to just come right in, and you're going to feather it in. You're going to just feather light. And we're going to stop in just no time flat. We're going to have it stopped. And he did. And we did. He said, I didn't know this bird would do all of that. I said, well, now you know, but don't try it. Not yet. Do it gradually. Work at it. But that just shows you what a light airplane will do if you handle it properly. And he thanked me. He says, man, I appreciate that. I said, don't you get out here practicing that. Not yet. You're not ready for that. Don't do it. I'm your instructor. I'm saying don't do it. I got you. And I never heard from him about that since, after that. So, but that's the way we did it in those light airplanes. Now, with all the turrets and everything and the guns, it was too heavy for that. You had to give a little extra airspeed. But those airplanes didn't weigh like that. I don't guess they weighed over 20,000 pounds. Whereas loaded, it weighed 65,000 with bombs and everything. It was feather. And we'd get out flying formation. And I had an old boy, was another instructor. He liked to play around a little. And so we're flying, and I just had a feeling. I said to my student, I said, let me have it for a few minutes. He did, and I'm sitting there, and I'm watching him flying on his wing. And I saw the pitch in his props change. And I just jerked all 4 of ours off. And he jerked his 4 off. And he stopped, and I stopped. He started feeding back, and I started feeding back. Went right back with him. Never lost formation. Got on the ground. Old Perry said, how'd you know to do that? I said, well, I'm a pilot. He said, I know that, but how'd you know that I was going to do it? I said, I just had a gut feeling that you were going to try to fox me on there to jerk the power off. And I watched your props. And when the shadows changed, I knew you'd pull them off. So I pulled mine off. He went up and stopped, and I stopped. Stood sitting over his eyes at me. But he was always pulling something like that on me. And we pull it on each other. You know, A.J. Mills and I, we did all kind of crazy things. He'd stand between the seats. He'd say, "Preach, what you gonna do next?" Instructor sitting over. I said, "Nothing." He'd chuckle. He knew I was gonna do something. But we learned the tricks of the trade, you know, and it was worth something to us later on in combat. You learned your airplane would do just so much, and you'd push it to the limit. I ran 3 engines one day, 4,500 RPM, and 50 inches of manifold pressure. No, 25 RPM and 45 inches of manifold pressure. Practically wide open, because 27 and 49 was wide open. When you'd be losing engine in the flak, so you just kept adding power to the other 3 to pick up the slack of that dead engine. And you know, I never had one to spit. Never had one to quit. Because I babied them until I needed them, and then I called on them. And I really called on them. But they were good engines. That Pratt Whitney
Twin row 7?
Twin row 7, 14 cylinder, 1,200 horsepower, 2,700 RPM, and 49 inches of manifold pressure. In every takeoff in combat, you know, we had that gauge up there that controlled the manifold on all 4 engines. Took them all up together, and it had a clip. I'd reach out, I'd put my hand on, I'd give him the throttles, and I'd put my hand on the manifold pressure control, and I'd slide the airplane with the left hand. And I'd flip that click that stop back, and I'd just keep nudging that thing. And I'd nudge it on up to about 53, 54 inches on takeoff. Man, they were howling. And as soon as I broke ground, I'd hit the gear stick. I picked the gear up myself every time. And as soon as I knew I was ready, I'd hit that handle. It was right by me. Push that button and shove a handle up. Then I'd go back to that and start cranking it off. Ease it back down to 49. Then I'd go to the throttles. I start easing them back to 45, 46, with the control up here back to 0. And just let the throttles handle it. I never had one to spit. I mean, never had one to lay back on me. Because I babied them, but when I needed them, I called on them. And I'd run it 60 inches if I needed to. And you take a chance on blowing a cylinder head off, but you got the power. Because at 53, 54 inches, you got not 1,200 horsepower max. Still at full RPM, you've got 1350, 1375. And you used it. You did it when you had to. But it was learning the tricks of the trade.
You told me once, going back to the airport, that somebody bet Ralph, or Ralph bet somebody, that he could take a J3 off in 6 feet or 5 feet or something.
No, I flew it across the 2 before.
Right, but that's how he got it off the ground. But somebody had bet somebody, as I recall, that it could get off the ground that quick, and they said, no way it can. And then he pulled that stunt.
Got a 2x4, strong wind, must have been a 35, 40 mile an hour wind, right down the runway that day. We had to hold the airplane to get out there. Put that 2x4 down there. He got in it. Revved it up full throttle, holding the brakes against that 2x4. Picked the tail up, got it level. When he got it wide open, why, he let off the brakes and pulled the tail down. It just hopped that 2x4 and was flying.
So it didn't have a takeoff roll.
Never wheel, never touched the ground. I never did that. He did it. I could have, but I didn't. I figured one demonstration. Ralph was a good pilot. He was a good pilot. Russell was the best one of all three of us, I think.
Mm-hmm. Ralph told, was it Ralph? Yeah, it was Ralph. When Jason and I flew to Humboldt in the Varga.
Yeah.
And we flew up to Union City.
Yeah.
And I took Ralph for a ride.
Yeah.
And I think that's when he told me that he had, or between the two of you had something like 98 or 99 or 100 or 105 or something takeoffs and landings in the same day. And it was in the CB at the lake.
Hauling passengers.
Hauling passengers. He said you'd load them up at the dock, take off, circle once, land, unload them, load them up, take off, circle, land. He said that's what we did all day one day. And he said I think we logged close to 100 takeoffs and landings that day.
I don't remember, but we were busy. I remember I went back to the airport to get fuel. And I think that airplane carried 120 gallons. And I filled up both tanks. And went back to the lake. And Dummy Collins, who worked for the newspaper, had an arm off. Car had sideswiped him one night, and he's driving with his arm out, and it hit him, took it off right there. Dummy was in there, and he was a dumb mute. He wasn't deaf, but he was dumb. He wasn't dumb, but he was deaf, whatever. And he had two of his friends with him. And they were both afflicted. His cousin or somebody. I had those three in that CB. And they were all good-sized people, full tanks, and no wind. I couldn't get it off the water. I made 3 passes down that lake, and I just couldn't break it loose. So I just taxied back, and we unloaded, and I gave them their money back. And they thought that was all it was to the ride. Riding them down. But that happened. We did. We'd take off and just make a pattern and land. Load up again, go again. Round and round. I never kept count of it, but it was a bunch. He may have embellished it a little.
He may have.
I expect he did, because he could do that.
He may have.
Well, could I guess. Yeah. And I went up there one day and was shooting landings in the harbor. Lake was rough, and it was rough in the air. And I was just practicing landings in that CB. We had somebody else with me, I guess. And I'd take off out toward the lake and circle and come back and land over the trees in the harbor. And I'd touch down and be stopped before I got out of the harbor. Turn around and come back and take off. Well, somebody objected to that. And wasn't a boat stirring, the lake was too rough. And that's the reason I was flying out of the harbor. And I got a phone call or something. So I don't know if it was Hank Foster, the FAA inspector, or not. He called me from Memphis. Somebody called him, reported it. And he says, did you do some taking off and landing in the harbor up there at the lake? I said, yeah. Lake was too rough to get on. No boats out or anything. No boats moving. And I just shot 3 or 4 landings. went on back to the airport. Well, he said, I believe I'd refrain from that in the future. I said, okay, no problem. And Carricker, who was the safety man, he was an aircraft safety man, and he won the grounded Jeannie Q that time. And I flew it back into Union City from Memphis, where they were having the air show kind of together. And he was there. And I think the red tag is still hanging in the airplane. I said, well, Paul, that airplane's safe. You know I wouldn't be flying if I didn't think it was safe. He says, I know, but I put a red tag in it. I said, well, can I take it on back home? He said, oh yeah, but don't fly it anymore till you get it fixed. I said, okay. That was all there was to that.
Was there, didn't you tell me there was a Civil Air Patrol squadron at the airport
Yeah,
for a while?
yeah. In fact, we went over to Saxton, Missouri, and they were selling J3s over there from that flight school, and they were surplus. And they had a sale, and I flew over there and took another pilot with me, and I had an airplane to Chattanooga. They said something about Chattanooga was going to pick that one up. I says, well, when they coming? He said, I don't know. But they better come today, because this sale's going to end. I said, well, what if I just pick it up and take it on to Paris? And if they don't show, then we'll just take it in our squadron in Paris. And they agreed to that, and I took it to Paris. And we did whatever we had to do to certify it, and then the Chattanooga folks got wind of that, and they called up and wanted the airplane. I said, you didn't come get it. And the sale was closing, so I brought it home. As far as I'm concerned, it's our airplane. Well, they didn't like it much. So they complained to the wing commander, Alf Waddell, who flew the Bonanza for Esso. He was a colonel down there, and he was in the CAP. And he called me, or wrote me a letter, and suggested that I reconsider. I says, Al, I wrote him back. I says, we went to Saxton, not knowing about this Chattanooga deal, but to see if we could buy an airplane for a squadron here. And they told me about this one. And I said, and she said, that's the only one we got left to sell. I said, well, if they don't come get it, can we have it? And he said, yeah. So we waited around there, and they didn't show up, so I got permission. I flew it to Paris. And I says, that's our airplane, and we've certified it, it's ready to go, and we're using it. And he was adamant about it. He says, but it was assigned to them. I said, well, then why didn't they come get it when they were supposed to? Because, as I remember, they said if they didn't get it that day, the plane was going somebody else. And that somebody else happened to be me. And I brought it home. Paid for it and brought it home. He said, Preach, I understand all that, but says, I'm in between a rock and a hard place with Chattanooga. I said, well, get them another one. They didn't come get the one they could have gotten. But he didn't. He sat tight, and so they came and got it. I charged them an extra couple of $100 for it. Of course, we certified it and everything. It's full of gas sitting there. I run a 25-hour inspection on the engine, changed the oil, plugs, and everything. I didn't like it, and I let them know real quick. It didn't sit too well with me. Well, we're not happy about it either, but we got to do it. I said, well, take the damn thing and go then. And I just went back in the office and left them. They cranked up themselves. They gave me a check. Paid me for the certification and all that. But I didn't put much time in that squadron. I just Wasn't too interested in it. We had a link trainer that we got from the Air Force, and it was operating. And we had put pilots in it, and would-be's and wannabes and all, and they'd fly it, and we were set up. But I didn't have a cadre. I didn't have any people in there. Howard helped me a little bit, but then he moved to Memphis. He had a squadron down there. Then when I moved to Memphis, I'd go out and meet with him, and he'd have me speak to him on occasion on certain subjects in Memphis at the airport. But we had meeting nights, but kids would come out, but we didn't have uniforms, anything like that. I had a uniform. Howard had a uniform with CAP insignia on it, but I don't know. I just couldn't get wound up about it. I was flying for Paris Manufacturing, and they'd call me, and I'd had to go. I had a contract, and I just had to go. So then I went to work for them 1st of October in 50, 1st of October, 50. And Prince Blackwood, who was a graduate of Mississippi State, he came to work same day I did. And Virgil Wall was out there. Virgil took some flight lessons from me. Prince never did. He wasn't interested in flying. But I took Virgil's place at Paris Manufacturing as production control supervisor. That's what they hired me for. He was drafted. And he went in, and they discovered a ruptured eardrum. So they discharged him. He was back home 6 months. And he came in, and I said, Virgil, you want your desk back? Well, yeah, I guess so. So I got up out from behind the desk, and he got behind it. And I didn't do a thing around there. I talked to Walt. I said, Walt, I believe I'll just go on back to the airport. No way. I got a job for you. And he'd hired Darren Nealon, who was kind of doing a round meeting with the sales reps that had come in. And Dan had the personality of a dead fish. Good guy, fine guy, educated, but he couldn't talk to people. He'd sit there and grin. He wouldn't say much. And I observed what was going on and talked with Dan, and he wasn't happy. He needed to be on a computer or something, He was not personnel oriented, talk with people. So I suggested to Walt one day, I said, can you use Dan back here in the personnel department somewhere? I said, let me see. So they put him back there running a computer, and he was running a time machine, old big old electric typewriter time machine thing. And he was supremely happy. He didn't have to meet the public. He just sat back there and worked for Walter Inman, who was head of the time department. And I says, I'll meet the salesmen as they come in. So that's when I started being the purchasing agent. And I enjoyed that, did I? Of course, I was flying every day nearly, somewhere, Paducah, Memphis, Nashville, Bowling Green. I'd go somewhere 3 or 4 times a week. Between our plants and between the airlines, in Paducah or Memphis. Didn't have any air service in Paris. So I was the air service. And they'd call me from Detroit. I'm flying into Memphis. Can you pick me up? One of the Holly boys, Dan or one of the other. So I'd go down and get them. Dan came in down there one day, had a set of skis. I said, Dad, what you gonna do with those? He said, I don't know. Can we take them in an airplane? Well, let's go see. So I put them in there and shoved them into the back there, and on top of the seat backrest and up to the windshield, and flew them back to Paris. And he took them with him. He's going on a ski trip. So I was just kind of a handyman around Paris manufacturing for a long time. Then I still spending some time at the airport on weekends. You know, you and I, we'd go out. And you remember that time we got in that Jeep and started to the lake, and highway patrol stopped, and you were driving. Lord, that was funny. That guy, I was sitting over about half asleep. My head was killing me. And here comes the highway patrol. Met him on a bridge. Mm-hmm. And he about jumped out of his car. I look, he goes, who's driving that thing? And he was turned around. I said, Bo, I said, he coming back. So you going off of the bridge, just pull off. We did, and here you come. What in the world is going on? I said, officer, my head's killing me. And as you can see, he can drive this thing, and he's safe with it. And we're going down to the lake to a friend's cottage, cabin on the lake, and we just gonna rest a while. He said, well, I can't let you get away with this. You know I can't. You were what, 8, 9, 10, 12?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe, I think it was about 10.
About 10.
Had to put that center seat in the driver's seat to sit on it.
Mm-hmm. And did I drive on down there to the magistrate's house or did? And so the funny part about it was we went in there and he wrote me up for the magistrate and he'd find
his house.
Huh? Yeah, in his house.
Yeah.
And he, what was it, $2 fine, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Something. And we were coming out and I said, Bo, the officer's with us. I said, and we'd been to Bowling Green that morning in the airplane. And you sat in that right seat up on your knees and fly. You flew it up and back on your knees. And I said, and I knew this guy, I can't remember his name, but I called him, I said, you know, this guy flew that my airplane to Bowling Green back this morning. My Lord, does he fly airplanes too? He was just dumbfounded. I said, oh yeah. He got in his car and left, shaking his head. We got in the Jeep, went on up to Bill Novella Laster's cabin, or Dr. A's cabin, I don't remember which. Bill Novella, I believe. And I slept all afternoon. Just about. It was on Labor Day weekend. Wasn't it Labor Day or was it July 4th? Mm-hmm. I think it was Labor Day weekend. Evelyn and Pam were in Humboldt. And you and I stayed together.
It was warm. We had the top off of it.
Yeah, oh yeah. Had the windshield down, everything. I think maybe we had it up to drive on the highway.
Where did we start from? Our house?
All
I remember is being on the bridge and the cop going by and stopping, and I remember from then on, but I don't remember where we started from.
I think we started from the house, but it was on a Saturday, and I wasn't working at the plant that day. So,
well, from the house on Eastwood,
mm-hmm.
we were just about out of town already.
Yeah.
At that point, because
Yeah.
nothing was built up out there. So it was.
But I believe I drove, and then I said, "Boy, you drive. My
Yeah,
head's
maybe you
killing."
probably did.
And I just stopped, and we swapped seats. I said, I reckon you'll just have to restrict your activities to flying an airplane. No. My Lord, you fly too? I said, yeah. We had some times, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Russell came up from Union City, and he was going to brought one of the coops. He had one of the coops down there, and we had one in Paris. And he brought it up, and we ran a 25-hour inspection on it. And he was going back, and they were building that north-south runway. And all we had to take off was about half of it. And it was just right there. Go down the end of the hangars and turn, go to the runway. And he had about maybe 800 feet from there to the highway. And he walked down, rode down there, taxied down there, and checked that engine, and wheeled out on that runway and poured the coal to it and headed right for that highway. I said, oh, Lord, he can't get off. And I stood there just mesmerized. And just before he got to the highway, he eased it off, and he cleared those fence posts across the highway by about that much. Scared the hell out of me, frankly. I just knew he was going to hurt himself, but he didn't.
1, 2, 3, you're there. Okay.
Okay, in 1960, see, you were 60, 43, 53, 63. You were 16, 17?
When? In 60?
Uh-huh.
I was 13.
13 years old.
You just skipped 10 years.
Uh-huh.
You went from 50, we ended the last one at about 1950.
And that's when I went to work for Holly.
Right. Or right around there sometime.
October
Or 50?
50, yeah. And we were, of course, still in Paris, and I worked for Holly for 10 years. I was their pilot for the company, as well as holding down a department head job in the plant. But I was always on call for flying, and subsequently I had a job that would relinquish my need for my being there when I had flying to do, and so I did it. And we fly to Bowling Green, Kentucky quite frequently, where Holly had another plant, and we had an interchange of parts and information and so forth. And then the rest of my flying was hauling personnel or parts from airlines in Memphis or Nashville. Would fly in from Detroit, and the Holly brothers and others employed by the company to come down to visit our plant. And so that was 10 enjoyable years, but I reached the end of my usefulness to the company as I saw it. And I became disillusioned with that, and finally in October of 60, I resigned, and in the spring in June of 1960, I believe. And during that summer, I flew around interviewing and looking at possibilities and things of that nature in various and sundry towns and cities. And finally, I was approached by a representative from the New York Life Insurance Company, who met me through his brother, who was manager of the Belk Settle store, newly opened in Paris. And so as a result of our talks, I wound up signing a contract with New York Life, and we moved to Memphis, Tennessee. And what year was that, Bo, when we moved to Memphis? 60, 61, 60?
I had just finished the 7th grade. So I think I turned 13 February before we left.
Okay. And
But that would have been 60. When I
Pam
turned
was
13.
so 6 years younger than you, so she was 7 years old when we moved to Memphis, I guess. Well, we went to Memphis. I sold my Navion to Ben Gaines, who had previously talked to me about coming with his company, and I had courteously declined that. But I didn't want to take the airplane to Memphis because I didn't figure I'd have a use for it. And so I sold it to Ben, and he subsequently hired a pilot that I had trained and given him his check rides, and he flew the airplane for Ben. And we moved to Memphis, and I went full time with New York Life Insurance Company. And that was a hard but enjoyable time. In the meantime, when we were going to Memphis, prior to that, why, we took a few days and went down to Fort Lauderdale, Florida with Butch and Pam and Evelyn, and looked around and almost bought a house down there and almost moved to Fort Lauderdale. But it was so hot. I had my checkbook out to give them a check for earnest money on a house. And I could have bought a nice 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a big family room and all of that for $17,500, fully furnished, even with the drapes still up in Fort Lauderdale. And I got my checkbook out and lay it on the hood of that, I think we had a white Oldsmobile at that time, lay it on the hood to write the check and almost burned my hands on that metal. It was so hot. I says, the heck with this, let's go home. I can't think down here. So I put my checkbook back in my pocket, and we got in the car and headed back to Paris, Memphis. Paris. Where were we?
Paris.
Paris. Well, we were living in Memphis. No, we weren't. We were in Paris. Back to Paris. Then when we decided to move to Memphis, a man whose wife in Paris had taught both Butch and Shelley in school, and I know he had taught you, Butch. I'm not sure if Shelley, Pam was that far along yet, but he was with New York Life, and I asked him about him because I was going to go to work in Paris. And they said, well, we'll approach him and see what we can work out. Well, they didn't work out anything. And he'd been with them for 30 years, so I acquiesced and agreed to move to Memphis. So we sold our house. We had been in a new house for about 2 years that we'd bought, and new brick home. It was nice on an acre lot with trees and stuff. And we moved out to Memphis and moved into a little 3-bedroom, 2-bath house out on Whiting Street out near Dale Riggins, who had recruited me to New York Life. And I went into the life insurance business. And it was kind of rough. They told me I needed to bring a few $1,000s with me in Fort Lauderdale if we were going to move down there, in order to get going in the business to tide us over. Well, that was no problem, but we didn't go to Fort Lauderdale. We opted on Memphis and moved there. And had offices downtown, and so we worked there for a couple of years, and I did fairly well in the insurance business. But it was tough learning the ropes and making the calls and everything. But I enjoyed it, met a lot of nice people, and built some clientele coming along. And then I couldn't build an agency with New York Life. They had salaried regional managers, but they did not sell and they did not do anything but recruit and manage. And I wanted an agency. So a friend of mine was with the Fidelity Union Life, Fullico they called it, and we signed a contract with them and left New York Life, and subsequently sold our house and moved to Jackson, Tennessee, and bought a big 2-story, 14-room house, 55 years old. And I kidded Butch before and now about he earned his first 2 years in college by painting that house. Worked all summer on it. On a ladder painting. Had 12-foot ceilings, brown room and a green room and a blue room, as I remember, or whatever, and we took 3 coats of paint on all the walls to get them the colors we wanted. We carpeted the entire downstairs and lived there less than a year, didn't we? And I was with Fidelity Union in Jackson, moved there, and then I had a call from Atlanta, and the vice president of the company in Atlanta wanted to talk with me. So he came up to Jackson and we talked a while, and he says, okay, we want you to move to Atlanta and go on our southeastern regional staff. And they were going to furnish me a car and all that stuff, and I would travel for the company. Well, we studied over that, and Butch had changed schools. He went to Colonial Junior High in Memphis, and Pam started the school in Memphis at a school up there in our neighborhood, and they were both getting along fairly well in school and doing well in school, and I hated to keep moving around, but I regretted doing it. It was hard to move from Paris to Memphis, and then we moved from Memphis to Jackson after 2 years in Memphis, and then we were there, and then they approached me to come to Atlanta. Well, Ralph and Gwen had been somewhere on a vacation trip out west and came back through Jackson, and he called me and says, what y'all doing? I said, I don't know, come on out. So I told them how to get to our house, and they came out there. And I had just been interviewed by Mac Easterwood, who was a regional VP in Memphis and in Atlanta, and he had asked me to come to Atlanta. So Ralph got there, and he and I went down to the local barbecue place and sat down there and talked for a couple of hours, and I laid it out to him, and he said, I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, you know, didn't you come with this company for the future? Company that you could advance in? I said, well, yes, I did. Well then, what's the question? I said, I guess I'm going to Atlanta. He said, that'll be fine. So we made that decision. Wasn't an agreement, just a decision. And we went back to the house. They spent the night with us and went on back to Union City the next day. And Mac had called me and he said, I'm going to mail you an airline ticket for you to come on down here. And we'll look for you on such and such flight tomorrow in Atlanta. And I still hadn't thoroughly decided to go. So I went, Evelyn and I sat down and discussed it some more. And I remember sitting on a commode with the top down in the upstairs bathroom and had Pam in my lap and broke the news to her that we were going to move again. She said, Daddy. I said, well, now listen, let me say this. Everywhere we've gone, you've made friends, haven't you? Yes, sir. I said, well, you're going to leave them. You left them in Paris. You and Butch did, and we did, and you left them in Memphis. Now we're going to leave them in Jackson and going to Atlanta. And just think what opportunity you'd have down there to make new friends. So look at it from that standpoint. And I don't know, I guess you and I talked about it too.
I don't remember.
I don't either. I don't think we did. I think it was just Pam. Of course, you were just ready to go, you know. I guess. You never complained. You never did anything but just go along. So I went on to Atlanta, and y'all came down with Pam. Y'all stayed in Memphis, in Jackson, till we sold the house. And it sold quick because I priced it to sell. And then y'all got in that green Lincoln,
Mm-hmm.
and got in that, and you drove your mother and Pam to Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And you came straight to my office. I just gave you directions, and you, 1, 2, 3, you were there, right on schedule. And then we went to the motel and stayed a few days looking around for a house and a place to live. And I'd gotten in, set up in my office down there, and was getting ready to start traveling. They'd assigned me a Chevrolet four-door sedan, company car. And we got to looking for a house, and we were in this motel in Atlanta about midnight one night, and I saw an ad. I went down the stairs on a Saturday night and got a Sunday morning paper, a Memphis paper.
Atlanta paper.
Huh?
Atlanta paper.
Atlanta paper, I mean. We were in the Howell House or someplace down there. Got an Atlanta paper and saw an ad in there that about 3 inches high, and you know, it described this house in Jonesboro out on a lake. 2-story underground garage, a lower level garage for 2 cars, and right on the lake, and brand new house, a year or 2 old, and the owner was being transferred to Panama with the FAA for 2 years, and he wanted to lease the house for 2 years. So we made an appointment with him for the next morning, on Sunday morning. He stayed home from church, and we drove down there, and struck a deal with him, and didn't even have a check in my pocket to pay him the rent. He wanted to lease a house for that 2 years, for a year, with an option for the second year. So I couldn't give him a check. I didn't have one. So I said to him, his name was John Cofer, really nice guy, nice family. And I said, John, if a handshake will do you, it will me. He said, oh yeah, it'll do. And so we got in the car and went on back to Atlanta to our motel. And I got some checks, and went down there the next morning and gave him a check for it. And then we had our furniture was on the way from Memphis. And they got there, and we got unloaded and got moved in. And John got his family out and his furniture and moved to Panama, down Panama Canal Zone. And we moved in this brick house on Lake Jodico, which was Jonesboro Development Company, and Dr. Spivey there had built that lake, and Lake Spivey was across the road from us, and then our lake was about 80 acres on one side and 600 acres on the other. So we moved in there, and I went to work. And I was traveling, and I'd leave generally on Mondays and be back Thursday, sometimes Wednesday, it just depends, and sometimes Friday. But I traveled there for a few years, and Butch and Pam got started in school. And in the meantime, we had visitors. Ralph and Betty came down. In fact, they were there one Christmas. That's my sister from Humboldt. They came down, and we were out on the lake, and we were to judge the Christmas houses for the lights and get a pick of 1, 2, 3, first, second, third. And Betty and Ralph went with us that night, and we drove all around the lake and looked at all the houses, and they charted them, and we picked out 1, 2, 3. They did that with us, and Ralph and Gwen came down, and they stayed with us a couple of 3 days, and And we just got going down there, and we stayed there for 35 years. We went to the Methodist Church in Jonesboro, and I never will forget, it was an old church with a bell tower out front. And the sanctuary had a balcony around it up there. And that's where our Sunday school class met. We got in, we called ourselves the upper room. And that balcony started to creak on us one Sunday morning. We had a big crowd there. And we were afraid it was going to fall in. So we started making a move. We got busy then with the church. And we moved into educational building that they'd built. 2-story brick building over here, and we had a room in there for the rest of our time at years in Jonesboro. And Butch had gone to, we got there, you were in 11th grade. We got there along about in December, I believe, and you were in 11th grade, and you finished that year in the Jonesboro High School, and then your senior year, and Pam went to the Colonial Elementary, and she did good in school, and you did good in school, and when you graduated, you went straight into tech, and I was traveling all this time, and once in a while, you lived in the dorm, and we would meet for lunch on occasion, and you'd come home on weekends much of the time and bring somebody with you a lot of the time. And we just had a good time on that lake. We bought us a fiberglass canoe, and we'd paddle around in that lake. You painted white lightning on the side of it. And we'd paddle that thing around. I'd miss you, and I'd look out, and that canoe would be sitting out empty in the middle of the lake. And every once in a while, I'd see your hand come up, and you were laying out there studying. Because you'd started right out of high school. You had a week off, I think, and you moved to Georgia Tech and went to school with a pre-aerospace engineering degree in mind. You doing the preliminary work for that. And Pam was in Colonial Junior High and elementary in Jonesboro. I think she was in about the 6th grade when we went to Jonesboro. She was 6 years younger than you, and you were in 11th, but she was in school. She didn't go to school in Jackson, did she? I don't think
she was only 5 when we moved. She was 5 or 6 when we moved. I don't think she did go to school in Jackson.
No, I don't think she did either. So you down there, and you had graduated. I remember you were 9th in your graduating class of 233, if my memory serves me right.
I remember that.
And so consequently, your grades were up there, and you were talking about going into airplanes and aerospace engineering and stuff. And I don't know, we didn't much give, the Air Force Academy had opened, but we didn't give it much thought, did we?
Not that I remember.
I don't remember we did either. And you could have gotten in there on a song if we'd just thought about it. But I didn't really want you to go that far away from home, I would have handled it, but your mother might not. And we were happy that you got into tech, and you were selected. I mean, there was no doubt about that. You got an appointment to tech, and you went up there and started to work. The only thing I regret about tech is that you didn't give yourself a break. You went to school 2.5 years without a break. I mean, straight through every year. And you told me one day, you said, "Daddy, I don't think I can cram another piece of information in my brain right now." You staved off. You really did. And I sensed that, and I suggested, and we talked about it, and you thought that was a good idea, or you talked about it, and I thought it was a good idea, one or the other. And so you took a quarter off. I said, drop out of school for a quarter, and then if you still feel about that going back, you go. If not, we'll do something else. You dropped out and got you a job. You rested. You got you a girlfriend and you dated. And Sue Ellen Glisson was in Humboldt, and she came down to visit us, and y'all were going fine. And then you had a girlfriend or two there in Jonesboro and a bunch, y'all had a group. Oh, Ab Dixon and Bill Matthews and that bunch. And I think you enjoyed that summer that you took off. I know your health seemed to improve simply mentally because you were just burned out. And so you then decided, you said, I'll go back one more quarter. But if I still feel the same way about the route I'm on, I'll do something else. And the Air Force liaison officer, you took ROTC at Georgia Tech for the first 2 years. And you had to make a decision then as to whether or not you'd take it the last two. And you had talked with an Air Force liaison officer at Tech. And this asthma thing came out as it should have. And he advised you that no way if you'd get in flight training with an asthma history. And this just knocked the pegs out from under you. I mean, I could tell it just was really hard for you. And so I had been down to West Georgia prior to that, as I remember, and talked with the president, and he took me back in his back office and showed me all the blueprints and the plan they had for building more buildings on the campus. And that's a big school now.
It's a university.
University, yeah. University of West Georgia. And I told him about your situation, and he says, well, listen, you tell him, we'll take him. Be happy to have him. I said, well, he's a good student. He's a good student. He just needs a change. So you did that, and you went down there, and you subsequently graduated from there and got a degree in business, which was a good move for you. And Pam was doing good in school, and Evelyn was doing around town there in Atlanta and Jonesboro, and making a lot of friends at church, as I was, and it was home. We had just settled in. Well, in about 2 years, here comes John Cofer. He wants to come back home. And I was driving home one afternoon from the airport, and it dawned on me, said to myself, I said, Seth, you better get you a place for your family to live, because John's going to be back, and he wants his house back. My 2 years was up. And there was a house that came for sale, 2 houses up the street, old house, red, looked like a barn, 2-story, with the lower floor was brick and rock, stone, and the upper story was upstairs. It was a basement, really, with a bedroom and a bath down there, and a big room, 16 by 23, as I remember, something like that. And furnace was in the basement, and we had a workshop in there, and it was good size, and we had some tools in there and stuff. And we went up there and looked at that house and talked to the fella, and he was from Brownsville, Tennessee, originally. Tom, it'll come to me, Tom somebody. In other words, I went up there, and he told me, he said, I want $23,000 for this house. We talked. It needed painting outside, and the inside was looking bad. It was sheetrock. Downstairs was bare block walls, as you know, with these cabinets across there. And we bought that house. I gave him $20,500 for it. And we had a family on the left side of us with 3 boys, the Kaisers. All 3 of them went to Tech. Were up there. I don't know if you went to school with any of them or not.
I went to school with Walter.
You went to school with Walter.
And
then Steve came along
younger.
later.
He was a year younger.
Yeah. So we had folks up there that he knew about in tech, and they were our neighbors. And on the other side, there were two families, and each of them had three boys, the Simmons and the Clontz. All the Simmons boys graduated in tech, and John made a doctor, and Bob made an aerospace engineer, still with them in Tulsa. No, he's in Dallas now. He moved, they got him in Dallas. But he's still in the airplane business out there. And Bill is retired from his job, fairly wealthy, because he made a killing in stock and stuff. And he lives in Atlanta, and so does his mother and daddy live there near him now, since Josephine's getting bad health. And so they're there. So we were there living right amongst those folks. We all went to the same church, all Methodist. So we had a good life. We had a good life on that, living on that lake, and the children just lived in it. Butch and Shelley and Jason and Emily, they would come down, and Butch had subsequently gotten out of college and went in the Air Force, and he was in finished his pilot training, and he was flying these jet trainers and training on them, and doing a good job, and check pilot and everything. And he was moved to Valdosta, and he was there at the Valdosta Moody Air Force Base, and they were doing fine. We'd go down and visit with them from Jonesboro. They'd come visit with us. And Jason came along, and then Emily, and then later Daniel.
Krista.
Huh?
Krista was in there.
Yeah. And Krista and Pam, our daughter, Butch's sister, of course, was they were living in Jonesboro, and she had married, and they had Krista and John Michael, and they were there, and then Shelley and Butch had Jason first, and he was a joy to all of us, as the other two, Emily and Daniel, were. All of our grandchildren were just a joy to Evelyn and I, and our children were. We just had a good time. And you remember that big table we got to go in the dining room so we could all get around it? What did the seat, 14? Something like that.
Yeah.
And it's still in this house right down there, in Pam and Larry's house now, here in Sharpsburg, Georgia. And I remember one weekend y'all were at our house, and and Jason was up at the mailbox or something, and he was coming down the driveway, and it's fairly steep, and he was loose. Man, he was jaggling. I said to you, I said, that boy's loose, said the bush. He said, yeah. And he came down and he said, Daddy, let's go down to the Yake. He says, Jason, it's lake. Say it. He says, lake. And he never said Yake again, I don't get it. You taught him how to pronounce his L's. We had a great time together. We sure did. And we missed he and Krista, Pam's first child. They were living out on the other side of town. And we missed Krista and Jason one day and looked down there and they were in the lake. Little bitty thing, 2 or 3 years old. Wasn't that old, were they?
I don't know.
Yeah, Jason was about 2, I guess. But the water was about that deep. They were up about here. And Evelyn panicked. Lord, those children in the lake, go, honey, run, Butch. I says, honey, they're fine. I'm going down there and get them right now. They're fine, just don't panic. So I called you and we went down there. Something went down and got them out of the lake. They were having a ball. We stayed down there with them a while. Maybe we got in the lake with them, I don't know. But we had a good time on that lake. And you remember when you and Bill Matthews jumped the road and got over to Spivey and in the canoe and went across over there, and the cops got after you, or the guards or somebody over and fussed at you about being said, get off this lake. You're not supposed to be over here. And he kept the canoe. Y'all came walking back, you and Bill.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me so mad. I said, I'm going to go over and just beat the slop out of him, whoever he was, doing these kids that way. I said, boy, we go and get that canoe. He said, well, we'll go get it. I said, okay. And you and Bill went back and got it. I said, you go over and tell that guy to release that canoe to you, and we're going to bring it home, and we guarantee you we'll never be on your lake again with it. Just don't worry about it. We're going to get off, and you leave these kids alone. They meant no harm. So y'all went and got it, and here you come paddling back across the road back in Jodico, I think, came on to the house. So we had a good time. And you and Bill Matthews were good friends, going to high school together. And we did. And then you graduated and went to Tech. You were up there, and then when we left, when you got through with Tech, you went over to West Georgia. And that's when we got you a motorcycle, wasn't it? And you had a classmate in high school whose husband had been drafted and had been in, Korean War or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he was coming home and was going to go to school, and she said he needed some cheap transportation. Little short girl, you remember?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What was her name?
I don't remember. Went to high school with her.
Yeah. And she wanted, and we found this Triumph over there. The guy
It was a
had
Honda.
Honda?
The one we bought was a Honda. Honda 160.
Oh, that was a motorcycle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean it's car. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Triumph.
so we went over there, and this little girl, they had the motorcycle. Then I found this car over in Riverdale or somewhere in the paper. And I said to you, Butch, get on your bike and ride over there. And they need some cheap transportation for her husband to go to college, get back and forth. And they had a car. No, who had that car we bought for you? That little Triumph. I don't remember, but anyway, we
I
traded.
think they had the car.
Huh?
I think they had the car.
They had the car, and I said to you, they wanted $1,600 for the car. I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And you had about $400 in the bike. And well, I said, now you go over there and do a little selling job if they want a motorcycle, and tell them you'll take $400 for it and give them $12 for the car, and $16 for it. And they'll give you $4, so it made you net cost you was $16 or $12. So you went over there in about an hour. You was back in the car. You done dealt with them. Come back.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got the little car, and you enjoyed that. Then later on, Pam got on. You and Shelley had married, and you were in Texas. Where were you when she graduated from high school?
When Pam graduated?
Uh-huh. She was 6 years behind you.
Yeah. I graduated in 70, but I was a year late because I transferred. I should have graduated in 4 years would have been 69.
Mm-hmm.
So she would have graduated, I graduated from high school in 65. She would have graduated in 72. 71.
71.
71, we were at Moody.
Yeah.
We would have,
You were at Moody.
we would,
No.
no, we weren't there yet.
No.
We weren't there yet. Because we got to Moody, and I graduated in 70, went to pilot training, finished up in October of 71. So we were still at Randolph when she graduated.
Yeah.
In spring
Okay.
of 71.
Still at Randolph.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And in flight school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What was I going to tell about that? So she graduated from high school, and I was all set to get her. And she said she wanted to go down to that school down there on where it's on 75 now, that little town down below Jonesboro. Girls' school down there. And she had,
yeah.
I don't. It'll come to us in a minute. But anyway, she was kind of leaning toward going there, but she really didn't want to go anywhere. She hated school. She didn't like school. And I said, Pam, why don't you go to college? Don't you want to go to college? Daddy, don't make me go to college. I said, well, I won't make you go because you wouldn't do anything when you got there, but nothing, you wouldn't study or anything if you didn't want to like it. So I won't force it. But you really ought to go and see how people live away from home when they graduate from high school. You ought to just go and get a year or two anyhow. But she opted out of that and she didn't do it. So anyway, you subsequently got out of flight school and went to Valdosta, flying T-37s as an instructor. And then T-38. You never flew T-38s except as a check pilot, or did you?
I flew them as a student.
Yeah, as a student.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I remember while you were at Valdosta, we were down there one weekend, and you took me out to the base. Or was that at Randolph?
That was Randolph.
At Randolph, and you took me out there, and we went in the sweat house. When did we go in that hot room, and sweated? What do they call that?
Sauna?
Huh? Sauna, yeah, I went in sauna. And you took me out in that simulator, T-38 simulator, in the hangar.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you putting me in there, and let's lift the thing up. And he flipped the switches and said, okay, you're ready for takeoff. He said, go ahead and take off and climb up to about 2,000 feet and level off. You shoved the throttle, here we go. Finally, you said, Daddy, you just went through 10,000 feet, and we don't have any oxygen in this airplane. I thought, Lord, how did we get up here so quick? And we had it. I had 10,000 feet on altimeter, if I remember correctly. So we had a good time with that. And Pam, Robert got married. I don't know when, the year. I don't know, don't remember exactly. But anyway, they got married, and then you and Shelley had Jason.
That was in 73.
73, and then Emily came along in about 75, 6.
79, 80, 79.
79, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we were down there and went to the hospital when Jason came. I believe it was Jason.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was in Nashville, and Shelley was expecting, and Pam was expecting.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a call at the airport. They paged me. I was waiting to catch a plane, come to Atlanta. And I went to the phone, and it was Evelyn. And she says, you're her granddaddy. I said, well, how's Pam doing? He said, not Pam, it's Shelley. I said, oh. And she says, we need to go down there as soon as you get home. I said, well, that's okay, we'll see. I got home 5 or 6 o'clock, and I didn't even change clothes. We just got in the car and packed a little suitcase, headed to Valdosta. And got down there, and we were standing there in the window looking at that baby, you and I. And he was a fine-looking little critter. Yes, sir, old Jason. Then y'all bought a house out there in Valdosta, that white brick. And I know we were thinning out some azaleas out on the lake, and Robert had that new GMC pickup, and we loaded it down with azaleas and took them to Valdosta and set them in your yard, You remember that?
I remember them being there. I don't remember putting them out.
Well, I think you were out. You were in school or something, out flying.
Oh, okay.
And he and I put them out. Well, Shelley told us where to put them. And Jason was just a little bitty thing then, of course. Just been born a few weeks before.
And Krista was born, what, 10 days apart?
Something like that. Yeah.
So she was 10 days later.
Mm-hmm. Krista was born, and John Michael, of course, followed her. And then you and Shelley had Jason down there, and then Emily was born
In Florida.
in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We moved there in 77. She was
In
born
77, you moved to Florida. And we went down there to see you a couple of times, and y'all would be by our place now and then. And Betty and Byron had moved down there and bought a place. And you were in the real estate business down there. I think you were showing houses or something for a while. You got your real estate license. And so we've had some good times along the way, and we've had some kind of tough times too, in a way, as it always is true when you're bringing a family along. You have some times that get fairly tough, and but we enjoyed every minute of it. And now you have, how many grandchildren you got now?
3.
Jason got 2 and Ellen 1.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jason and Ellen have 2.
Jason and Ellen got 2. 1.
Yes, Jason and Ellen have 2. And Emily and Andy have 1.
1.
With
So,
1 more on the way.
and 1 on the way. So you got 3 with 1 on the, you got 3 on the ramp, 1 in the hangar.
Right.
We put it.
Right.
Yeah. And when is their baby due?
July.
July. Well, that's right. Coming right up here on us, isn't it? And they're all doing fine. Jason bought him a house, and Emily and Andy have a house, and they're in, and they live over at the Wake Forest. Yeah, over where the school is, Wake Forest University. Okay.
He's in seminary.
He's in seminary.
Southeastern Seminary.
In seminary. He's going to be a minister or a Christian worker or a missionary or something. Well, that's great. That's great. Ellen's getting along all right. She's a sweetheart. And that Jason, he's out of my eye. He'll say, Gran, we've had so much fun together. I said, what, Jason? You remember? I said, yeah. Do you? He said, yeah. Yes, sir. I know they're all a joy to you and Shelley, just like they are to us, and like you and Pam were to us, and your children and Pam children. That John Michael's just as lovable as he can be. Looks like a bum all the time, but I don't know. I can't dislike him. He's something. And that's what he's going to be. He's just his daddy, just like his daddy. But Robert is one of the best friends I have today. Nothing he wouldn't do for me if I could just ask him. Well, Mr. G, of course, when you want that done, we'll do it. Of course, I don't anymore, but that's a working relationship we had, just like we had with Shelley, you know. Just all in the family. And we enjoyed Betty and Byron. I never will forget, we were up there one time and went over to Betty and Byron's house, or maybe that was when they were in Atlanta. And didn't you paint his house or something one time? And I'm thinking, though, this was after y'all were all in Raleigh. And Betty said, oh, it's when you bought your house in Valdosta. Where were they then? And
They were in D.C.
They were in D.C. I guess that meant where we were, because we went by up and picked up some furniture and brought to y'all, didn't we, from D.C. back down to Valdosta?
Might have.
And you picked them up. We had them in the back of that blue '98 Oldsmobile we had, and we'd been to D.C. then. In barn, we put that table in there in the back. Betty said, did you realize what those kids did? I said, what? She says, they went to Valdosta and they bought a house and didn't say a word to us about it. I said, well, Betty, that disappoint you or something? Why? Well, it looks like they ought to ask for some advice. Advice? Butch didn't need any advice. He bought him a house. I mean, he thinks for himself. I don't have to think for him. And that's just the way he's raised. And of course, Shelley, she helped him do it. They did it together, and they bought a nice house. But she couldn't get over that, and she jumped up and out of that room she went. It made her mad, because I was pretty brusque with her. I let her know right quick that you could do your own thinking. You didn't have to have somebody do it for you. And I made it too tough on her. I don't know. But we got along fine. And Ed Barn, he's a pistol. He was a pistol. Well, see, you got 3 grandchildren now and 1 in the way. And Andy's in seminary.
Mm-hmm.
Jason got his own business out there running it, and I know he's making some money. He's making some money, or will. He's setting the groundwork. I know he, yeah, because he's smart. And Daniel is sophomore in college. What's he gonna major in, Butch?
He wants to get into, what he'd really like to do is get into film directing. But he's going to have to go through some other training to get that. So he's probably looking at something like broadcasting or editing.
Well, he's been pretty good on the mic, hasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
I thought he had. He was on the mic on one of your get-togethers, and when Emmy got married.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, he was a little trooper in that. I mean, he was. I know you just stood back watching him run the show.
Mm-hmm.
He'd go here, had that tux on, man. He was cool. He'd get in here and do it. I told him, I said, look at that boy. Isn't he a pistol? Good looking. Man, he's a good looking boy. So is Jason. Emily's a good looking girl. Got a good looking mom and daddy, though. They should look good. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, Bo. It's been a whole new ball game for me since she died. I don't know. I wasn't looking for anybody. I wasn't looking to get married again. Hadn't given it a thought. But it looked like it were just 2 magnets, and we were just drawn together. And she is so good to me, so kind, thoughtful. And I called her. I said to her the other day, I said, honey, won't you quit nagging me? She said, nagging you? Well, okay, you just get on, go on. Go to Pam's house. I said, I don't want to go to Pam's house. And we kid back and forth about that, She'll say, well, now listen. Your son-in-law and daughter planned this whole thing. Who started this? Larry. Miss Lucy, would you go say hello to my father-in-law? She came over there, drove that blue car up there beside me, and I'm sitting there in the lounge chair just cooling it. Had on blue jeans or something and an old blue shirt. She said it was full of wrinkles. I said, well, it gets wrinkled in the dryer sometimes. And I got up and went up to the car. And we talked for a minute, and she went on. And appreciate you stopping by. She says, okay. I gave her about a week, then I called her. I says, do you think it'd be possible for us to have lunch together sometime? She says, sure. When you want to go? I said, well, whenever it's convenient with you. I'm free. I'm footloose. So we set a date, and I went and got her and took her to Wendy's. I didn't know anywhere else to go. But she liked to go out to that place in Peachtree City where they serve all those noodles and stuff. And that's like I said. And we just, we'd go to a movie or go visit somebody or something, and didn't really call what you'd call dating, but Evelyn had been gone a year, and it seemed like 10. And then I asked her one day, I talked with Pam about it, and I don't know if I talked with you or not.
I remember.
I don't either. I asked to talk with Pam, and she went with me. And we went down at the jewelry store, and I went in there just looking at some rings. And I saw one that I liked, and that's the one she's wearing today. I gave her the ring, and I says, would you mind too much being engaged to me or something like that? Well, I'm really not looking. I says, neither am I. But you know, we're together for some reason. And I started grinning. She said, well, I said, I remember how you worked your way down that pew in the church. Every Sunday she'd come a person closer. She didn't really, but that's what I teased her doing. And finally, though, we were sitting side by side. And then this lady just came in there one Sunday morning. Larry sat there and Pam here and me here. And she didn't know Pam them that well yet, so I sat there and she sat on my left. And this lady came in, said, y'all got room for me? Lucy started scrounging over, and I scrounged. She sat down between us about that much space. Pam said, Larry said, tell her to move. He said, I'm not going to do it. But she sat there, but she never did it again. Because I was nice to her, but I didn't go overboard. We still go to church together, that lady and her husband. And so we got started, and we'd go out to eat mainly, and either go to my house and watch TV or come to her house. And I just fell in love with her, and she did me. And we talk about it now. I says, honey, how did that all come about? And we weren't looking for somebody. We weren't looking to get married. She said, no, I sure wasn't. And I said, well, I wasn't either. And here we are talking about it. So I talked to Tom. I said, Tom, he said, you old dog. You old dog. Well, see, Tom had married Pam and Larry.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked Lucy to marry me, but she wouldn't set a date. So finally, 1st of June, we'd known each other a little over a year. We set June 8th. And that's when we got married. Tom married us in her house, as you were there and you saw it. And I appreciated you doing that for me. I sure do. I wish Shelley could have been there, but she was busy with her business and had Daniel there and everything. And I understand that. appreciated you making the effort to come. And I didn't know how that was going to turn out, and then I had that little stroke. And I was there in the house one day and trying to dial the phone. I couldn't dial it. I couldn't even hit the right key. And I tried to call her yesterday. I got the wrong number twice. But it was the same number. And that lady was so nice. Sounded like she was some young lady, 20 or 25 years old. But I asked her to marry me, and then we set the date of June the 8th at her house. Nothing big. We didn't send out invitations or anything. And the only people who were there were her family, part of her family, and you, and Pam. Family-wise. And we got it done. And I've been so pleased and happy with her. She's beginning to know you, and she's appreciative of it, because she just, you and I are not the easiest people to get to know. We don't talk, well, now I say I can't talk, I talk all the time, but you don't. You're quiet, reserved, and she thought you just didn't like her. And I said, well, Lucy, I don't think that's the case. I said, you just don't know him. But he's true blue. I mean, he'll be your best friend when you get to know him. One of your best friends. And I was so happy when she said, let's have them all over for dinner. I'll cook dinner for them. I said, that'll be fine. You go in the store and get what you need. She went up there and spent $150 to go to and 140, 30 or something, and which ain't hard to do in the grocery stores these days. And that was a good meal she put before us, and I was so happy y'all came. I was glad all three of you came. I knew you would come and Pam would come, and I'm glad Larry did, because he just fits right in. She thought for a while, she doesn't anymore, I don't believe, that Pam and Larry had an ulterior motive in introducing us. Well, they just wanted to get somebody to take care of you. I said, now, Lucy, that is not true. So you get that out of your mind right now. Because you see, when I need somebody to take care of me, I'll go find them. I'll go to a nursing home, assisted living or something. I don't have to have my family take me in and keep me. You and I are married not for that, but because we love each other. She said, well, that's right. And not a day passes, Butch, we don't tell each other that. Baby, I love you so much. She says, you know, I love you too. Sounds silly, two old folks, but I'll tell you what, I miss Evelyn. I truly miss her. We've been together 60 years. Tom asking church one Sunday morning, we talking about aged people in this world. He says, Everett, how long were you and Evelyn married? I said, we were married 59 years. Would be 60 now if she were still living, something like that. And everybody just clapped. I am the oldest man in the church now. And maybe, I don't know, I don't think I'm the oldest person, but I'm the oldest man. And some of those women might be a little older. But I'm the oldest man in the church. And somehow or other, Dr. Powell is a wonderful doctor. I'd trust him with anything and everything I have. Trust him to advise me on anything. He's as honest as the days are long. At least he always been with me. And just a fine Christian gentleman with a nice family, 2 girls. And he came in the office yesterday. And we were out there and we're in the waiting room and waiting for him to get to us. I go to see him once a month. And it's just a review and update stuff. He came in the door, he says, I said, well, here's my main man. And he said, you're the main man. You know, and we kibitz back and forth like that. And I tell him every time I see him how much I appreciate him and what he does for us. And I appreciate my family. I love them all to death. And I might not show it all the time. I know I got a temper, but Lucy's learned to live with that, and I don't show it much. Barely don't have any need to. And we get along fine, and I had to get used to that eating out every Sunday after church. Because you can't eat out in this town without spending a minimum of $20 or $25 for 2 people, as you know. And that's $100 a month that we spend to eat out on Sunday. But she dearly loves it. She said, I just don't feel like it's been Sunday if I don't eat out. I said, well, I'm going to go get Bill driving to church. I said, honey, you want to run over here to the grocery a minute? What you want to go to the grocery for? We going to church. I'm going to get her some cheese and crackers for lunch. She called me, yeah, you talk like a cheapskate. I said, I guess that's what I am. I don't throw my money away. She said, you sure don't. And she's getting to where she's watching hers close. Because you see, I'm putting about $1,000 a month into the kitty out of my pocket. And she puts, in addition to my Social Security, which is $860 or something, plus my VA stuff is $346, $1,100. She puts in $12 for her Social Security, a little over $1,250 something, and mine runs about $1,150. So I supplement that each month or whatever it takes. It might be $500, or it might be $600, or it might, some months it'd be $1,000, sometimes $2,000 a month. When the tax time comes around, to pay the taxes on her house, and she's got health insurance. I've got health insurance supplemental, and mine runs $180 a month. Hers is $130 or $140. And I won't dare try to change because I'm 83 years old. Who's going to write me any coverage? I just got to keep it. And so we just all threw it, all of our expenses in the kitty. We tithe to the church each month. We tithe on the basis of $1,700 a month, $175 a month. And that includes part of my kicking in that I offset the overdraft, you might say, on our account. But she handles it all. She's got our bank accounts and all that in the computer, and she can just go sitting over her computer and transfer money. And it makes it convenient, makes it handy. So we write them write church a check every month. Started out at $200, and then she just unilaterally dropped it to $175. I don't know why, and I didn't ask her. Because she keeps the books and writes the checks. I don't do any of that. I know what she's doing. She tells me, but I don't follow behind her and check on her. But we're getting along just fine, and we're getting along better and better all the time. And I'm so happy for last night when the 5 of us got together. Oh. You see, her family's great. They're good to her, and they just kind of accept me, I think. But that's all right. I'm not in the same league with them socially or any of that stuff because I don't want to be. I'm not money hungry. I'm not spending money like it's going out of style. Both of her daughters have good jobs. Both of her son-in-laws have good jobs. They make a lot of money. Her son makes a lot of money in his business. In fact, he bought his wife a store. She's running a store over in Scottsdale now in Arizona. Give, odds and ends and stationery and little gifts and whatever. She does that, and he does the cooking. He holds down his job, and he travels all over that area of Arizona. And while we were there, old Robbie be the first one in the kitchen and the last one out. You go in for breakfast. What do you want, Everett, for breakfast? I said, well, how about some ham and eggs? You got it. He put that little baseball cap on his bald head and he get back in. And he just get out of his way. His wife doesn't cook at all, to my knowledge. He does it all. And he loves it. He loves to cook. Lucy says he takes after me. She likes to cook. She loves the kitchen. In fact, she loves it so well, I'm not allowed in it. And I alluded to that in Sunday school class. Well, I said, well, I don't go in. Somebody's talking about happening around the house. Son. I said, well, I guess I do. What I can do, I'm just not allowed in the kitchen. You what? I'm not allowed in the kitchen. I can't even go in there and pour a glass of water in the sink hardly. I just set it down and she pours it in. Oh, and they'd look at each other and grin. Oh, Everett, I mean, she's got him a bit in his mouth. She's leading him around with a lead rope. I said, no, it's not that bad, but she says, just stay out of my kitchen. And you know what? I'm happy to do it. And they just laugh. It's a joke around church. Somebody said, hey, you been in the kitchen lately? I went in, I had a kind of where I'd fallen, had a black eye spot up here, not on by. What happened up here? I said, I went in the kitchen. And they laughed. I said, no, I got out yard and I was sitting down. I got up too quick and I fell on my face and bumped it on the concrete. But we get along fine, Bo, and I want to come up to see y'all and visit with you for a day or two if you will allow us to, and see all the grandbabies, my great grandbabies, and get to visit with them some. And I want Lucy to meet Shelley, get to know her, and of course we're in the market possibly for moving somewhere out of here. I'd just as soon move out of the state of Georgia. And we don't know if we want to go to a warmer climate or go where some family is or just what is. And I think maybe the latter is what we ought to consider. I'm supremely happy here. It's a small town. You can get downtown and back in 30 minutes. It's no hassle. And yet we've got everything we need right here in driving distance, close to us. But it's getting so crowded. They're looking for another 60,000 people in this county this year. That's how fast they're building houses. There's somebody that gets killed around here, either accidentally or in automobile accidents, shootings, or whatever, every week. And we're this far as we are from Atlanta. It just, tears my heart out to see all these young folks out here killing themselves in automobiles. They just don't have any sense. They don't have any respect for anybody or themselves. Like John Michael, he don't have any respect for himself or anybody else. Look how he was dressed today. You see, he had to move out of my house because I wouldn't put up with that when they were staying out with us. I called his daddy and said, you better come get your boy. I'm afraid I might whack him upside the head because he makes me so mad I could kill him. He is the sorriest human being I ever saw. And that's not like him to be your son. He's not like, he shouldn't be that way of being your son. And I says, we can't do it. We can't keep him. He came got him. But that's all behind us. He was expelled from school again and brought that on for a week. Had to stay in every afternoon. The teacher stayed. He'd sit back there in his seat, supposedly work. Anyway. But he's come a long way, but he better marry that girl and give that baby a name. Now, I've been kind of lenient with him about that. I've suggested it a time or two. Now I'm going to tell him how it is one of these days. One of these days. Because there's some of my blood in him.
Mm-hmm.
He has no right to do that. None. From an ethical standpoint, from a Christian standpoint, from being a man, no standpoint will allow what he's done. Got her pregnant and then wouldn't marry her. Promising her he's going to marry her. We going to had a date set and then backed out. And I gave him everything I had out of my house over there. Gave him that king-size bed, 2 chairs in the living room. Mm-hmm. I took my platform rocker with me. Just gave it to him. He came over and got it out of the house. Took it, gave him a breakfast room suit. That's it. One that you grew up in. Got spur marks on them where you got in the chair with your spurs on and your boots.
The one that was sitting in there in the kitchen?
Mm-hmm.
I've got that at home. I got that. I got that table and that hutch and the chairs.
In the kitchen over here in Jonesboro, in Sharpsburg?
Uh-huh.
Those maple.
Uh-huh.
You have?
Uh-huh.
Well, I thought John Michael had those. I know he's got the king size because I didn't have where to put it.
Yeah.
But you've got the kitchen, the
Yeah.
breakfast room stuff.
Right.
Where is it in your house, Bo?
The chairs and the hutch are in the attic, and the table is in the living room. 'Cause we can't
Okay.
get it through the stairway in the attic.
Oh, okay.
We don't
Well,
have
I'm
any place
glad
put
to
it.
know that. I'm glad you got it.
We don't have any place to put it, but I
Yeah.
want to keep it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now let's see now. How can we wind this thing up? On what can we do? Pam and Larry. Well, we hadn't talked about Chris and Eric, have we?
No.
Larry's boys.
No.
Eric's just built him a $300,000 house. His boy's nice. And Chris has got a big house. It's a 2-story, but it looks like a 1-story on the front. In the back, it's full 2 stories. And he's got, lounges and chairs down there, and probably a bedroom or 2 down there. But they're doing fine. He's not working right now. He's having back problems. And Larry told me today he might have to have surgery on it. They're doing some other stuff, hoping it'll do it, but he hurt that back some way. And Eric and what's her name, Mandy? That's not it, but you know what I'm talking about. They're getting married in May, I believe, this year. And
Can y'all stop for a minute? You come see them before they go.